In the wild deserts of 1800s Arizona, I rescued a Chinese woman from the edge of death. But the next morning, I woke to find her lying on top of me, and her first words left me speechless. This isn't just a story of survival. It's a story of hearts changing. If you love emotional Wild West stories, like the video and subscribe. Let's get started. Arizona Territory, late 1800s. The land stretched wide and silent, broken only by dusty trails and stubborn sagebrush that clung to life. I'd been riding along the riverbank, looking for stray cattle when I saw her. At first, I thought it was just a fallen deer or a discarded blanket, but as I got closer, I saw a woman, a Chinese woman, collapsed on the rocky ground, her breathing shallow and weak. Her leg was swollen, marked by 2 deep punctures, a rattlesnake bite. I knew the danger, not just from the venom, but from the trouble it could bring. Tensions ran high between the settlers and the Chinese laborers who worked the mines and railroads. A white man found with a Chinese woman, especially one near death, could invite suspicion and violence from all sides. I stood still for a moment, heart pounding. A wrong move could start something I couldn't finish. But as I knelt beside her, I saw something in her face. Pain, yes, but also resilience. Her fingers were curled around a small silk pouch embroidered with a faded flower, as if she had fought to survive until her strength gave out. I could have walked away. It would have been easier. But I remembered my mother's voice telling me that a life in need is never an enemy. And so I lifted her into my arms. Carrying her was no easy task. Her body was burning with fever, yet she felt so light, as though the desert wind had taken most of her strength already. My cabin was a half-hour ride away. I placed her on my horse and held her upright as we rode, the sun beating down harshly on us both. The river shimmered behind us and the desert stretched ahead, quiet and merciless. When I reached home, I laid her gently on my only bed, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility fate had thrown at my door. The wound was angry and swollen, red, spreading up her leg like wildfire. I rummaged through an old wooden box where I kept dried herbs, the same ones my mother used to treat infections and fevers. She had believed healing was a language shared by all people. I crushed the leaves, mixed them with warm water, and placed the poultice on the bite. I worked carefully, speaking softly, though I didn't know if she could hear. Her breathing was ragged, and sweat covered her skin. Every now and then she made sounds, words in a language I didn't understand, perhaps calling to her ancestors or begging them to keep her alive. The hours crawled. The desert night settled outside, bringing a chill that slipped through the cracks of the cabin walls. I lit a small fire, placing wood slowly to keep it from flaring too bright. I didn't want to frighten her if she woke. I sat beside her, watching her chest rise and fall in shallow movements. There was a fragility about life I had never noticed before, the kind that makes silence heavy. I found myself praying, though it had been years since I'd spoken to any god. I prayed simply for her to stay. Her fever rose before midnight. She trembled violently, her eyes flickering beneath closed lids. I placed cool cloths on her forehead and held her hand to keep her from thrashing. At one point, she gasped and I thought I was losing her. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I whispered to her, telling her she was safe, that she was not alone. I don't know why I said those words. They came from somewhere deeper than thought. Perhaps I needed to believe them, too. In that moment, the cabin felt less like a shelter and more like a battlefield between life and death. The night dragged on, endless and silent, except for the wind rattling against the windows. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I kept watch like a soldier guarding something sacred. When the first hints of sunrise crept through the window, my exhaustion finally overwhelmed me. My head grew heavy, and I leaned back beside the fire. I remember my eyes closing, my body sinking into a brief, desperate rest. I told myself it would only be for a moment, just a moment, to gather strength again. But when I opened my eyes, I wasn't where I had been. Something heavy pressed down on my chest. The fire was dim, but still warm. It took a second to understand what I was seeing. The Chinese woman was on top of me, not violently, not with hostility, but holding me firmly in place. Her face was inches from mine, her hair, dark as polished jet, falling around us. Her eyes, though tired and shadowed, were sharp and alert, like a hawk, ready to strike if threatened. Her breathing was steady now. She was awake, and she was studying me. Instinct told me to reach for my knife, but something in her expression stopped me. It wasn't aggression, it was caution. She had chosen this position deliberately. She spoke softly, her voice raspy from disuse, the words slow as if she was remembering how to form them. "You were dying." Her English was broken, but the meaning was clear and froze me in complete shock. I swallowed hard, unable to speak. She placed her hand over my heart, pressing gently. "Your breath." It stopped, she continued. "In the night. I felt it." Her palm was warm, steady, grounding. She leaned close, her ear resting above my heartbeat, listening as though the sound itself was sacred. The silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable, but heavy with meaning. When she finally spoke again, her voice trembled, not from fear, but from an emotion she couldn't yet name. "I thought you were dead," she whispered. Her words settled in the air like falling dust, slow and unhurried, but heavy enough to change everything I understood about the night before. She told me her fever had broken while I slept, but a deep chill had taken me. She believed the sickness had drained my life energy, my chi, leaving my spirit vulnerable. In her culture, a life saved creates a sacred debt, a responsibility to protect that life. That was when she had placed herself on top of me, not to restrain me, but to guard me. She was sharing her own warmth, her own life force, to keep mine from fading away. She believed if she held me close, her own spirit could anchor mine to the world of the living. And I believed her. I had never been protected like that. Most of my life had been defined by distance between myself and others, between trust and survival. My father raised me to work hard, speak little, and expect nothing from anyone. The frontier didn't allow space for sentiment. Yet here was a woman who had known me only in pain and fever, risking everything, possibly even her place among her own people, to ensure my life did not slip away. Gratitude didn't feel like the right word. It was something deeper, something that roots itself in the bones. When she finally sat back from me, she looked uncertain, as though she feared my reaction could undo everything that had passed between us. I simply nodded and whispered, "Thank you." Her shoulders eased just slightly. That was when she told me her name, Mai. Her voice softened when she said it, as if sharing something sacred. She spoke of a distant home across a vast ocean, of a family she may never see again. She belonged to a people who had come here seeking opportunity but found mostly hardship and suspicion. To them, white men were often cruel bosses or violent strangers. Yet she looked at me differently. "You are not like the others," she said, her eyes steady, clear, and without accusation. The days that followed moved slowly, like warm sand shifting in the wind. Mai regained her strength little by little. She walked first with hesitation, then with confidence. She cleaned the cabin with silent, thoughtful movements, as though she were returning order to a place long forgotten. She hummed sometimes, soft melodies in her native tongue, low, rhythmic, carrying the memories of distant shores, incense, festivals, and sorrow. I didn't understand the sounds, but I understood the feeling. Something inside me, something I hadn't realized had grown numb, began to warm, like a frost melting in the presence of spring. We spent our days in quiet companionship. I taught her how to mend fence posts, how to snare rabbits, how to grind grain into flour. She showed me how to identify herbs her grandmother used, plants that looked like simple weeds to me but held the power to soothe pain or calm a fever. She taught me how to predict the weather by the scent of the air and the shape of the clouds, and how to listen for the river long before it could be seen. We didn't speak often, but when we did, the words mattered. Every word was chosen, not thrown. Every silence held meaning, not emptiness. Trust grew between us, not quickly but steadily, like water shaping stone. There were nights she sat beside the fire, her face lit gold and amber, speaking softly of her home. She told me stories of her village, of festivals with lanterns and dragons, of her mother teaching her embroidery, and of her father who was a scholar. But she also spoke of the treacherous journey of loss, of the echo of cruel words in a foreign land. Pain lived in her memory, but so did pride. I listened, not as a settler, not as a stranger, but as someone willing to understand, and in that understanding, something changed in her eyes, too. One evening, I caught her standing outside the cabin, looking toward the horizon. The sky was deep violet, the kind of color that promises either dawn or ending. She stood very still, like she was listening for something I couldn't hear. When she came back inside, she simply sat down beside me. No explanation, no question. She had made a choice. A choice to stay a little longer. Maybe for the night. Maybe for the season. Maybe for something neither of us could yet name. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. Her presence was answer enough. The truth was simple. Saving her life had changed mine. Before her, my days were practical and silent, defined only by survival. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. I had not realized how deeply loneliness had woven itself into the structure of my life. Mai didn't just warm my cabin, she warmed the cold edges of my existence. I began to laugh again, softly at first. I began to speak more. I began to feel more human than I had in years. She had been the one in danger, but somehow I had been the one rescued. Her love didn't arrive with declarations or promises. It grew quietly, like sunlight through a window one morning when you hadn't realized how dark the room had become. And when I looked at her, really looked at her, I saw not just the woman I had saved from death. I saw the woman who had brought me back to life. The world outside still held conflict, division, and history we could not rewrite. But inside that cabin, there was peace. A peace I had never known before. And I knew without question that she was the reason,